Hello and welcome to another bonus episode of the Evolution of Horror. We're bringing you so much bonus content this week. That's because this weekend sees the release of a brand new horror film called Hallow Road. This is the new movie by writer-director Babak Anvari. Babak is one of my favourite modern horror filmmakers. He had an incredible debut feature with Under the Shadow back in 2016. He then followed that up with a weird, trippy body horror called Wounds from a couple of years later. And then he did I Came By, a kind of interesting Netflix home invasion movie. His latest film, Hallow Road, is a really interesting, twisty-turny, high-concept thriller set in basically entirely within the confines of a car, starring just two actors, Rosamund Pike and Matthew Rhys. This is a kind of really interesting mystery thriller. The less you know about it, the better. But I will just say, go and see the film. And if you want to hear my review of it, you can hear that over on Patreon on this month's Fresh Blood. I covered that as well as a whole bunch of other new releases. And the rest of the team will be discussing it on the next Fresh Blood as well, airing on Patreon in a couple of weeks. But I got the chance to sit down and chat to director Babak Anvari and the star of the film, Matthew Rhys, about making this movie. Now, the first half of the interview is pretty much completely spoiler-free. We reveal very little about any specific plot points, just more about the kind of making of the movie more generally. But I do, after a spoiler warning, ask Babak and Matthew a couple of more plot-specific questions, particularly things that happen in the final act of the movie. So only listen to that final section of the interview once you've watched the film if you do not want to be spoiled. So please enjoy my conversation with Babak Anvari and actor Matthew Rhys about their new movie, Hallow Road.
Okay, remember the chest compressions.
You can't.
Yes, you can.
She can't do this.
She has to. Don't let her die, Alice. She won't ever forget her face, Frank.
This isn't working. Get off the road. Run!
Dad, I can see you.
No, that's not us. That's somebody else's car.
Hello?
She's been seen.
Babak and Matthew, hello. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for being here. Babak, we were just saying before we started recording, I think I've chatted to you about every single one of your movies so far.
It's great.
I love it. It's such a treat for me. Tell us a little bit, for people who don't know anything about this story, tell us a little bit about Hallow Road.
So it's late at night. It's 2 a.m. These parents, played by wonderful Matthew Rhys and Rosamund Pike, they get a phone call from their daughter, their teenage daughter, that says, I'm on a forest road in the middle of nowhere, and I just had an accident, hit someone. So the parents panic, jump in the car to get to her, to fix the situation, to help her. And from that moment onwards, almost the whole film is in the car when we experience these parents' very anxious psyche. And as they drive to get to her, the daughter is on the other end of the line, and things starts unraveling and gets strange.
They do.
In many senses.
Yeah. It literally goes on such a journey, doesn't it? I love it. Matthew, what was your kind of reaction when you first kind of read the script and your character?
Oh, quite a lot. A number of things, to be honest. But the primary feeling was something something that harkened back to what I always wanted, which is what of a script is when you turn pages 2 and 3, you are then desperate to know how this ends.
Yes.
And I haven't read anything like that for a very long time. And I was only like so many times you're reading scripts going, I wonder where this shoots, or who the catering will be, or blah, blah, blah. And there was only like 3/4 of the way through, I went, oh my God, we're still inside the car. We haven't seen the girl yet.
I know, there's a moment, isn't there, when you suddenly go, oh, this is going to be the whole film, basically, right? And when you go into it knowing nothing about it, there is that real kind of, it's quite unexpected, I think.
Yes, and there's this element which struck me, like, if you are to watch this in a cinema and have a communal experience with, a number of people, the audio element of it is incredibly unique and individual to that person, because everyone's imagination has their own take on what the girl is going through.
Yeah.
So I said, what a unique film to have the kind of, everyone sees the same thing, but not necessarily in their mind's eye. I was like, well, that's going to be something so special. And then a million other things was like, you know, can I pull this off?
Yeah.
Because it talk about being laid bare. It's two actors in a car. Obviously, you know, the voice of Megan McDonnell who supplied so much of our performances.
Yeah.
Because she gave so much. But you're kind of laid bare. I did like the fact that I wouldn't have to wave my hands around, which I'm accused of doing sometimes, that I'd be glued to a steering wheel. I was like...
give you something to do with your hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No director... I know Babak would never go, stop waving your hands. You're like Joe Cocker. It's weird, right? Which a director did say to me once. And then, so I was like, that's great. Sitting down the whole time, that's great.
Lovely.
One position, great. One costume, great. And then I got in, I was like, oh no, this is 2 weeks of trauma in a confined space. Ironically, in a vehicle called a Discovery.
Oh my God, I love it. Yeah, it must have proved to have some interesting challenges in terms of filming it. Babak, this is as well, am I right in thinking this is the first of your feature films that you didn't write too, right?
Yes,
this is
correct.
entirely somebody else's story. How was that for you, kind of taking on somebody else's work in that way?
It was great, and hats off to Will Gillies, the writer. So when I read the script, I was like, this is such a challenge, I have to do it.
Yeah.
So I always... Even if it's someone else's script, it's like, how can I make it my own? And to be fair to Will, he was like such an amazing collaborator because I had some crazy ideas that he loved, and like there was nothing that he basically pushed back on. So it was a great collaboration, and it all worked out. But yeah, the challenge aspect of it was like how to maintain tension in a car for such a long period. That was like... That was the masochistic side of me. That was like, this is what I want. This is the pain I want to put myself through, but mostly Matthew and Rosamund.
And he did. But I remember, because, you know, after I read it a second time, and then I was like, how's he going to shoot this? And then we spoke on the phone, and when the first sentence out of your mouth was like, I know exactly how I'm going to shoot this. And
That's
I was
great.
like, oh, great.
Yeah, it must be nice to know that you're in safe hands. How was it? How was that shoot for you, Matthew? Like in terms of, were you actually in a real car? Was this all a set? Was it in a studio? Like, how did it all work?
The exterior stuff obviously was real,
yeah.
And then the interior car stuff was on a volume stage, you know, with all the LED projections, which helped enormously. Not, you know, I think for all involved. I don't think, like you said from the beginning, there's no other way of doing this. But it's intense because it's not, you know, you do a shoot and you go, oh, this is a light day. This is, you know, I can coast a bit today. I can be a bit hungover. There's none of that. There was no going, I'm going to just let the other actor carry this one. There was like, it's like, we're going out to play doubles against the Williams sisters every day. And
it must have, did it feel, it almost feels quite theatre-like, I imagine, right?
Yeah, it was very much like doing a one-act play.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, he perversely put us through that very experience.
Oh, really?
Very first day, I was like, I'm going to put 3 cameras on you, and how about we shoot the whole thing from the moment you get into the car all the way to the end in one take.
Sadist.
Love that. That's a great idea, though, I suppose.
It was a great warm-up. Like,
to watch.
I sold it to everyone. It's a warm-up. It's just a warm-up for the cast, for the crew.
Treat it as a warm-up, treat it as a warm-up.
And then I ended up using a lot of that take because it actually was just incredible. It was. I think one of the other things that the very first conversation was like, also just to let you know, it's like 98% of this film, it's going to be you and Rosamund's close-up. No pressure.
No pressure. But it's all going to play on your face.
Oh my God. And how was it? Did you and Rosamund kind of talk a lot about these characters and what they're going through? Because I guess, again, in a filming situation like that, you've really got to immerse yourself and put yourself in the head of those two people, right?
Yeah, very much so. And there's a degree of open-endedness to the ending.
Yes.
So that was a constant source of, is it this or is it that? Which kind of lends itself to the performance and also kind of terrifies you as well, because you go, am I landing the right thing?
But that element that you said terrifies you. I mean, from day one, we were like, this is meant to be parents' worst nightmare. Right. And I was like, it needs to feel like a nightmare. So wanted to add that sort of nightmarish quality to it. That's why, we purposefully, there's a level of ambiguity, like a dream in it that, that hopefully help you and Rosamund as well you know.
Totally. It all kind of funneled its way into those. You know, it was very carefully curated by the Mad Maestro here.
I love that. Well, you do think about it when you watch it. I mean, I think even before the overt horror kicks in, it is such a horrific situation, right, that these two people are put in. And I think, you know, you do think to yourself, God, what would I do in that situation, right? And I think, you know, those parents, your character particularly, I suppose, has to make some pretty difficult decisions and potentially quite bad decisions as well. But I guess that's kind of the point, isn't it? Is that you think about what you would do for your own child and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you know what William did so beautifully is kind of present both sides of the coin in that couple,
right?
And in that you know, parent makeup in a way that I think, you know, slightly challenged the archetypal norms of who would be doing what, which I enjoyed enormously. But I found myself very easily understanding Frank's kind of decisions, because he'd be the same. He'd be like, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to protect my child.
For sure. So Babak, what were your kind of thoughts in how you make something like this visually interesting and cinematic, I suppose? Because in some ways, I almost thought to myself, this could almost have been an audio play. It almost could have been a radio play in some ways. It's just a phone conversation, essentially.
To a certain degree. Obviously, then visually it shifts a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you play the film, like even the color palette changes, and it becomes more and more expressionistic. Obviously, visually, certain odd things starts happening in the car that represents, you know, the what the parents are going through, like their unconscious mind. And also it's so funny because a lot of people telling me that like it is a theater experience, like you need to watch on a big screen because of the journey you go through, again visually, and also the sound design of it, done by Paul Davis and Tim Burns. It's just fantastic. Again, that shifts a lot and changes. And we had this thought as well. So everything outside the car almost everything outside the car is shot on 16mm film. And at the moment you get into the car, it switches to digital. And yeah, the idea was that like the outside, it's more like verite style. It's the objective world. Once we go through that windscreen, we enter almost like the psyche of these parents, and things get more and more, like I said, expressionistic as the story evolves. So, it was great fun to plan that, and with my DP as well, Kit, who's done all of my films so far. So, yeah. Sorry, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. You absolutely did. And actually, let's talk about the sound as well. Yeah. Matthew, did you have the voice of what we hear, the actress that we hear, while you were filming it? Or
yes,
that wasn't just Babak on screen.
No, shouting at us, do it better, do it better. Yeah, no, well, without question, without kind of dear Megan McDonald in what we called the trauma booth next door, giving her all for 2 weeks, going through it minute after minute, absolutely laying bare everything you hear we heard, and then she, as you said, I had to do it again, just to ADR it for sound.
So she was doing it. Was it kind of live? Like were you actually dialoguing?
The whole thing was live. Yeah, which was the only way to do it, really.
Yeah,
performance-wise for us. And yeah, just everything she brought, she gave it to us for free. All you have to do is react. God bless her. I hope they're paying for the therapy.
That's why she called it the trauma booth.
The trauma booth, yes. Yeah, it's still with her.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the decisions you made with the audio, Babak, as well, because it feels like there's very little, there's not a lot of music too, right? There's a lot of periods of just quiet when they're in that car too.
I actually think silence, I mean, there's never like just pure silence in the film. There's always some level of sound, but I think silences in movies are so important because those are the moments you really sometimes get to feel what the character is going through and what they're thinking. And that's a huge part of sound design for me always. And there is music, but I always say I didn't want to plaster, like put music on every beat. But when it kicks in, done by amazing Lauren Balfe and Peter Adams, you really feel, and it's based on one of my favorite 80s tracks by Depeche Mode. The whole score is kind of behind the wheel. So that was fun to do.
Love that. Did you take any kind of cinematic inspiration? Were there any particular films that you kind of drew from for this one?
It was tricky. Like obviously these sort of chamber pieces have been made before, but I was like, how can we do it differently? Like for instance, one of my favorite films is Locke. But that film was done like, I think Tom Hardy was just driving it. But I was like, how can we get more out of the car and push it, especially for a film? And this is why like the idea of like taking a car into a studio came to me, like dismantle a car and that becomes our set. And, it's already very limiting to shoot in a car. So it's just like, how can I push it more? So, there's always references. I talked to Rosamund a lot about like representation of like unconscious sort of like Bergman always talks about it, like the dream and reality and the fine line between it and how cinema represents that. I really tried to do that with this film. I don't know if we succeeded, but
definitely did.
I think so. I think so. And obviously the story becomes increasingly kind of ambiguous in that way. Matthew, did you guys talk about, I guess, what quote unquote really happens in this? Like, is there a definitive answer? And did you guys discuss that?
We did a Q&A last night and Rosamund asked the audience what they thought was the ending, because it's still up for debate for her. Yeah. So we had endless discussions. We kind of went around in a lot of different kind of myths and law circles. And no, I'm still, I like had a different opinion last night.
Right.
Yeah. So I was like, oh no, maybe it's not that. Yeah. And then, and then my parents were like, wait, what happened to what? And you're like, and they're off. Like, we got them, So, but I love that. That's what film so rarely does these days.
That's the thing. We always said we wanted it to be a conversation starter and people go and analyze it and have their own interpretation, because you can watch it as like a psychological thriller, you can watch it as like a sort of supernatural. I mean, it dips its toes in folk horror a bit. So it really depends on like
what I love is how definite a few people were last night. No, it was definitely this. No, it was definitely, and you're like, I love it when it kind of sparks that divide.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I might actually, in the last couple of minutes, if it's okay with you, ask some more spoilery questions at the end of this interview.
As long as you don't spoil them.
Yeah,
I won't.
I die.
I'll give a big warning before, but I'd quite like to end with maybe asking a bit more about that, if that's all right. Let me ask you about the kind of the horror element of this as well, because obviously, Babak, you've made kind of classic kind of more sort of gothic-y horror like Under the Shadow, and you've done kind of different. Do you kind of see this movie as horror? This is a kind of difficult one to classify in a way, right?
I always say it's almost like those sort of old school classic ghost stories, like M.R. James stories, or that like kind of it's more ambiguous than like so those were my inspirations, and in some ways it is a little bit like Under the Shadow, my first film, because that film also some people see it as like a political allegory or like a societal sort of like a drama, a psychological thriller, and then some people only see it as like a haunted house story. So it's kind of tried to do a similar thing here. It's less horror than that one. It's more, I would say it's like, as I said, it just dips its toes in like sort of full sort of horror mystery a bit.
It's Under the Shadow, obviously, and we've talked about this together before, but it has some really classic kind of big scares, like jump scares, right, that always really get people. And this one's a little bit more restrained. Like, were you deliberately trying to go for, I guess, a different kind of scare, I guess, in this movie?
Yeah, this one was more about the tension within the family and the dynamic, and that was the fascinating bit for me. It was less about let's have people jump. There are like one or two big moments, but it's not a lot of them. That wasn't necessarily the story itself. It's so intense, and it gets more and more dreamlike that I think it just crawls under your skin rather than makes you jump.
Absolutely. Matthew, are you good with horror generally? Like as an audience goer, are you into horror?
I'm fine with it. I get more. My pulse races more from films like Hallow Road than out and out horror.
Yeah,
the kind of this one disturbed me in a way that horror films tend not to. I found it kind of puts you in a darker place and a more palm sweating place rather than the kind of out and out kind of run-of-the-mill ho-hum bog standard horror.
Absolutely. I want to get to a couple of final more spoilery questions, but first of all, Babak, just to finish with, I've got to ask you about Cloverfield. You are going to be doing a new Cloverfield movie, right?
I cannot talk. I cannot talk.
Anything for me? Anything for me?
God.
Do you need a dad? Yeah.
Sadly,
Do you need a worried dad?
From now on, anytime I need a worried dad,
I'm your man.
There we go. Or you could play the Cloverfield alien creature.
Yes, it was a bit worried. Yeah, it's just a bit concerned.
if you think about the first movie, it is a war. It's
Right.
Yeah, it looks like a worried monster.
Right.
Yeah, smashing into things.
I've had performances described that way in the past either. He just looks like a worried monster smashing into things.
You could probably do stuff with your arms more.
I've been told not to, and yes.
Oh, Matt, you can't. Can you even tell us if that is or isn't happening?
Honestly, it's one of those situations that like
Babak's legal team are waving furiously at us. His phone is going off.
Babak's looking very nervous all of a sudden. Okay. All right. I want to finish then, and I will say to everyone listening a big fat spoiler warning, because I just want to ask you something that maybe relate to more of the kind of final act of this movie.
Rosamund Pike is an alien.
Yeah, exactly. Well, can I ask you about the decision to cast Rosamund as the voice of the other woman, right?
Yeah.
As well, like what were the decisions there in terms of what you were thinking?
When I read the script, I talked to Ian Henry, who originally developed the script with writer Will. My first pitch was the voices on the other side of the line. They need to be done by the same actors who are playing the parents.
Right.
And the husband says a few words, but it's not as extensive as.
Well, I like to think I was pretty extensive with my few words.
So that was the reasoning for that was that the odd couple on the other side of the phone for me was always like kind of like the shadow side of the parents and the sort of their inner witch and wizard. And that was always fascinating to me. It's like everything that they couldn't do, the other couple can, and they can be very, very sort of get to a very dark, strict place.
Right.
So that was always that was the reason. And I'm very glad that everyone was on board because that kind of unlocked the story for me, and that was the start of okay, I want to make this more dreamlike as the story sort of unravels. Sorry, a lot of ramble. I hope I answered.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was the mind of Babak Anvari.
I love it. Yes. I love it. Matthew, what do you think really is going on then in this movie? Like, what is ultimately was the daughter dead the whole time? Like, how do you kind of read the ending?
That's what I came to last night. That she was dead the whole time.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. But I weirdly I came to it last night. And I was like,
okay, so what did you think originally?
Well, I was struggling with a lot of things that that there was a changeling, that she did. That there was an exterior element that, other than what we see. I don't know. My imagination went a bit rampant.
It was so funny. I was talking to the Rosamund last night, and she originally she was always like, "No, this is the trauma that the parents are experiencing. It's all in their head." And then last night she changed her mind. She was like, "No, I think it was the fairies. The fairies took the daughter." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, no, I changed my mind."
Join us next year when we come back with more theories on Hallow Road.
Love that. So Babak, do you have a kind of in your head a kind of what's really going on here?
Yes, but I will never share it.
Okay.
Because coming from me, I think then it would just give it a definite sort of.
God, he's smart.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yes. Yeah.
Or am I getting out of questions?
Yes, I do. I just won't tell you. Yes.
It's a fun one, though. Is it a difficult one to kind of sell in a way, because you don't even reveal that it is a kind of supernatural, I guess, if we even want to say it's supernatural, until sort of midway through the movie?
No,
right?
yeah, I was so adamant, when with the marketing and the original script, the version I read didn't have that. So those were the Those were the crazy ideas that I pitched to Will, to and Ian Henry, who and my producing brother Luke in tow. So
what was the original script then?
So it was more like a straight thriller,
right?
Yeah, but it just I just thought it can do a lot more with like what the parents are going through, and like really tap into the sort of psyche, because all they have is their anxiety and their imagination. And I was like, how can I put that on screen? That's
what we all have.
Yeah.
Our imaginations and our anxiety.
And I always say I'm full of anxieties and I like to inflict it on other people. That's why I make these stuff.
If I have to suffer, you do. Get in the car.
Exactly.
I love it. How has the reaction been so far? Screenings, festivals and that kind of thing.
So far it was mostly positive and great reaction. A lot of like people getting surprised. And sorry, going back to your previous question, I was like, please, let's not market it as I don't want anyone to know that it has like that sort of supernatural odd twist. So it genuinely surprises people when it happens.
I think that was the beauty of South by Southwest, is that there were no trailers out.
No, and no one knows anything.
And I think they really went in not knowing nothing about, which is so great in this day and age, to walk into a movie and know nothing about it. It's a rare privilege. So the reactions were a lot more visceral than kind of those kind of who now have an idea of it going in, I think.
Yeah, amazing. Well, there we go. Well, we're out of time. Matthew and Babak, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And there we go. That's it for my interview with the brilliant Babak Anvari and Matthew Rhys. And don't forget, if you want to hear my review of the film, check out Fresh Blood. That's over on Patreon. Patreon.com/Evolution of Horror. Hallow Road is in UK and Irish cinemas right now. Write to me. Let me know what you think of the film. Let me know your theories on it. You can find me on all the socials or drop me an email, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for listening. Join us again soon for another episode of The Evolution of Horror.